I'd like to introduce someone who's a real good friend. I consider him a good friend. He's a good man. We don't see each other a lot because he's out all over the UK. And to me, to my mind, and I've been around a while, and I've been around with some real good people. Nicky Cruz, Dave Wilkerson, Jim Cimbala, various different, Louis Palau. I've met all of these different people. But to me, this man I'm introducing, Barry Woodward, I think right now he is one of, if not the preeminent, gifted evangelists in the UK right now. He's the author of a book, Once an Addict. He's also the brains and the heart behind Fixed Conference, which is a conference that is held every year here in Greater Manchester, in the wonderful city of Bolton, London. And where his church is, Bridge Church. He's a tremendous advocate of the church, and he's traveling around the UK. And I just want us to stand to our feet right now, if we would. Shake yourself up. I know it's raining outside, but how many of you know Jesus is reigning inside today? And I want you to give a massive Victory Outreach welcome to the evangelist, Barry Woodward.
Nice to see you. Turn to somebody near to you and say, you're looking pretty hot today. Now try and convince them that you really meant that. If you'd been in the madness that was going on in our flat that night, you'd have heard us say it for yourself. Our flat was on the Bull Rings in Hume. Raise your hand if you've ever been to Hume. Ever lived in Hume? I know there's at least one person. And I spent ages doing it up so that it was like a nightclub for two. A bespoke club. For my girlfriend and me, you should have seen it. The windows were boarded over so the place was pitch black. We never had the big light on, we just had two spotlights on, a red one on the wall and a green one shining up from the floor. We had a psychedelic oil machine that projected patterns all across the room. I had a little home recording studio set up, and I had two massive speakers that I'd made from kitchen worktops. The crowds would be in the madness that was kicking off a mile down the road in the Hacienda nightclub, and we'd be in the madness in our bespoke nightclub for two, 24/7. I've been whizzing off my head on amphetamines for months. You should have seen me. I look like a space cadet on acid wearing a shell suit. Then one night, I thought I heard somebody shouting across from another block. I knew three lads that lived in the corner flat on the top floor in a squat. I thought it was them. I said, Lise, did you hear them shouting across then, love? No, I didn't. I heard them again. Did you hear them that time, Lisa? No, I didn't, Barry. So I went to the balcony door, opened it, looked across, and thought, there they are. They're at the window. Right, that's it. So I grabbed my pickaxe handle from next to the door, like you do. Steamed out, ran to the top floor, legged it across the walkway to their block. I climbed on the handrail so I could reach the side window, and I smashed it in with my pickaxe handle. What are you doing shouting across at me? I know you're in there. I smashed all the glass out, lifted myself up, looked in. There was nobody there. The flat was completely empty. Where have they gone? I jumped down from the rail, legged it back down to the flat. I said, Lisa, there was nobody there. She said, I know, I told you that before. I said, did you tell them I was coming? I sat back down on my pub stool that I'd cut the legs off to make it look oriental. And with my head sandwiched between my two massive speakers, I turned the house music right up. My girlfriend smiled, and that's when she said it. Just another day in the madness, innit? Do you know, it's not just me who's been in the madness, is it? See, each of us in this room have been in the madness of some kind at some point on our journey. Question is, what can we learn from it? Here is one lesson for you to take away. In the madness, you can change your lane. I've been in the madness in Manchester, or Madchester, as it was called then, for 15 years. And then I changed my lane. By now, I split up with Lisa, and she'd sold the massive speakers that I'd made at our kitchen worktops when we'd lived in our bespoke nightclub for 2. She sold them to a drug dealer called Digger. By this point in my life, I was so poor, I used to go to KFC to lick other people's fingers. I'd lived in 3 hostels. One of them was just around the corner from here, James Street Salvation Army Hostel. I lived in that for a year. And then I had to get out of town, if you know what I mean. So I moved into the flat on the outskirts of Manchester. Got me grants from the council. Put me nylon carpets down. Put me net curtains up. Went to our parade dog zone, got myself a little dog, a Jack Russell. She had a black patch on one eye, short stumpy tail. And she was really aggressive. Called her Kim. Went to radio rentals. Who remembers when you could rent telly and video players? Who remembers video players and those videos cassettes the size of a brick? I lived in that flat for 4 weeks, and then I met 3 people. All of them were Christians. One of them invited me to church, so I went. I turned up that day. They were waving flags around and banging tambourines. I'm thinking, these guys are all basket cases. It was like the opening of the Olympics. It was weird. I thought, I came in here to get away from people who are on drugs. And it looks like this lot are off it on drugs. The guy gets up to speak and he said, we believe in a God who can heal. Is there anybody in this room who's got any issues? Is he having a laugh? Got more issues than Vogue? If you want to be prayed for anything, come to the front. I thought, what have I got to lose? I got out of my seat and I walked to the front with loads of attitude. All right, mate. What can I pray with you for? I'm thinking, how long have you got? So I told him. Been an addict for 15 years. I'm on 55 mils of methadone. And I hear voices. I suffer from amphetamine psychosis. He said, okay, I'll pray with you. That day, he prayed for me. And I had a light bulb moment. That was the day when I changed my lane, because I walked into that building, a drug addict, and I walked out of the same building, a public speaker. Seeing the madness, you can change your lane. Listen, 2,000 years ago, 2,000 miles away, God became a man. His name is Jesus. Jesus is God with skin on. He came to this earth and he was tempted just like you, but he resisted. And at the age of 33, he allowed himself to be nailed to a cross. On that day, they laughed at him. It was madness. On that day, they shouted abuse at him. It was madness. On that day, they spat on him. It was madness. But he went through all that for you. See, he died on that cross to pay the price for your faults, for your flaws, and for your failures. He died on that cross so that he can wipe your slate clean. And when you give him consent to come in, that's when you can change your lane. But you need to give him consent to come in. As Paul said before, I'm a speaker, and some of you know and some of you don't, but for those of you that don't, I travel throughout the UK, speaking at events. That's what I do full time. And for half of the year, if you put all the nights together that I'm away from home, it's like 6 months of my working year I'm sleeping in hotels. That's not a complaint. That's just how it is, and I'm okay with that. Once, I was staying in a hotel in Derbyshire. I get invited to all these glamorous places. I've got a friend called J. John. He was in Hawaii, and I was in Derbyshire. And it was a nice hotel. Mine was a small room, which was fine, and the door was right next to the bed. Late one night, I got up to go to the bathroom. It was pitch black, and I'm fishing around for a door handle. And I found a door handle, opened it, walked through the door, and then I realised that I'd walked into the corridor outside my room. So as I looked round to my door, the door closed shut. Oh no! I've locked myself out of my room, and I've only got my shorts on. So I went down to the reception. The shutter was down, not 24 hours. There wasn't a soul around. So I went to the front door of the hotel. I'm still half asleep, and there was just this little building just outside the front door with a light on. I thought they might be in there. So I walks through the front door of the hotel, goes to this window where the light's on, knocks on the window. And then I hear the door of the hotel close behind me as well. So here I am now, stood outside this hotel. It's winter. It's been raining. I've got nothing on my feet. The ground is all gravelly. Looked at me watch, and by the way, I've only got my shorts on. I looked at me watch, thought, oh no, it's only 2 o'clock in the morning. I'm going to have to stand here and wait for ages until somebody comes to give me a key card to get in. Then I thought, sack that. So I grabbed the handle and I pushed and pushed and pushed. No way could I get in. Then I thought, sack it again. And I grabbed the handle and I pushed and I pulled and I pushed and I pulled. And the door sprang open. It was one of those magnetic type locks. So I could get into the hotel, but I had nowhere to sleep. So I go to the first floor of this hotel. I see a door with a sign on it, meeting room. I open the door, and it was set out, horseshoe shape, ready for a business meeting. And at the bottom of this room was a little bench, about 1.5 meters long. I thought, I'll have to sleep on that. So I takes all the cups and saucers of the table that's been set up for the business meeting, gets the tablecloth, walks down to this bench. I lies on this bench, my legs are hanging off one end, my head's dropping off the other. No way did I sleep that night. I literally lay there and watched it get light. Then I heard somebody down at the reception. About time. So I goes down to the reception and there's a woman opening up the shutter, now open. I said, love, I've just slept upstairs in the meeting room. She said, you were lucky. It's usually locked. I'm thinking, lucky? I've just slept on a little 1.5 meter long bench with this tablecloth as a blanket. And it cost me 55 quid. Lucky. One way of putting it. As mad as this was, the next day when I was sat in my room, I thought, that's just like us and God, that. See, in a way, we are all like the hotel. God is outside and he wants to come in. But he will never grab the handle to try to push and pull his way in. No, instead, he stands there and waits until he gets a key card. There's a guy in the Bible called John. He said that God stands at the door. See, he doesn't push, he doesn't pull. He stands and waits. See, God will never force his way into your life. No, instead, he waits for you to give him the key card. He waits for you to give him consent to come in. And when you give him consent to come in, that's when you can change your lane. See, in the madness, you can change your lane. But you need to give him consent to come in. And right now, God is stood outside your life. And he wants to come in. But he needs your consent. What are you going to do? Please stand. I'm going to pray a prayer. There are two groups of people who are going to pray this prayer with me. The first group of people are those people. You've never prayed a prayer where you've given God consent to come in. You might have prayed a few crisis prayers, like me. God, give me bail. This is a different kind of prayer. It could be that you're attending this church, or you've just been brought by a friend and you're kind of searching for something. Listen, God is outside your life and he wants to come in. He's waiting for you to give him the key card. So the first group of people are those people, you've never prayed a prayer, you have never given God consent to come into your life. Today you're going to pray this prayer. You're going to give him consent. And he's going to flick your switch. That light bulb moment's going to happen for you. The second group of people are those people, you have prayed a prayer, you've started your Christian journey. But you know that right now you're not cutting it. You're not living how God wants you to live. Listen, the Bible says there's no condemnation for you, you know. But what I want to say to the second group is pray this prayer. Reconnect with God. Get God back into your driving seat. Because he doesn't want to be in your boot, or the back seat, or the passenger seat. He only wants to be in the driving seat, behind your steering wheel. Pray this prayer, reconnect, and allow him to take hold of your steering wheel once again. So there's two groups of people going to pray this prayer. The first group of those people, you've never prayed a prayer where you've given God consent to come in, you're going to pray it. The second group of those people who have prayed a prayer, you've started your Christian journey, but you're not cutting it, you're going to pray this prayer to reconnect. And God's going to wipe this slate clean, and you're going to leave this place. Crack on with the rest of your Christian journey. Everybody else, you make up the third group. You're going to pray to encourage the first group and the second group. Are we ready? All three groups, repeat after me. Dear God, I come to you today, and I admit that I'm not perfect. God, I ask that you forgive me for all my faults, for all my flaws, and for all my failures. God, I ask that you wipe my slate clean, because right now I want to change my lane. While the heads are bowed, no looking around, if you've prayed that prayer, you're part of the first group or the second group. I want you to raise your hand so I can see it. Put your hands up so I can see them. Put your hands up so I can see them. Put your hands up so I can see them. Keep your hands raised. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. Put your hands down. There might be a few more. Just prayed that prayer. You're part of the first group or you're part of the second group. I'm going to count down 5 seconds. Just to give you 5 extra seconds. There's 13 people already raised their hands. You don't need to raise them again, but if you've not raised your hand, you're going to raise it if you prayed the prayer. As I count down for these 5 seconds. Anybody else prayed that prayer? 5. Raise your hand so I can see it. 4. Anybody else prayed that prayer? Anybody else? 3. 2. Anybody else? Another one here. Fantastic. That's 14 altogether. 1. I'm going to count to 3. All those people who's raised your hands on the point of 3, you're going to leave your seats and you're going to walk to that corner over there just near the door. Somebody's going to come and stand with you. They're going to speak to you. They're going to give you a DVD called What's Next, that as a charity that we run. You're going to get one of those that tells you what to do next. There's a booklet wrote by my friend Jay John, who I mentioned before. You're going to get one of those as well. But it's important that you do this. All those people who raise your hands on the point of 3, you go into that corner. 1, 2, 3. You go now as quickly as you can. Let's give them a round of applause. Not finished yet. Okay. Please be seated. Got to keep the main thing the main thing. As most of you know, the main thing that I've worked on over the years and developed is how to use my story to connect people to God's story. In other words, how to turn my mess into a message. And in a sense, you've had an element of that today. That was part of a talk that I do. That was just one lesson from a talk that's got 4 lessons in. But I got a text from Paul a couple of weeks ago, and he just said, could you do something a little bit different? So we're going to do something a little bit different. The main thing's the main thing, okay? But an evangelist's job is first to preach the gospel, also to equip the saints. And the main thing that I usually do is preach the gospel through storytelling, and that's my thing. And I do quite a lot of equipping through mentoring and some of the events that we do in the week and Saturday stuff and things like that. But that's the main thing for me. But what I want to do today, I want to take us all on a journey so that we can all tell our stories. So that we can all turn our mess into a message. Stories. Raise your hand if you like to hear other people's stories. Do you know, people in general like to hear other people's stories. If you go into a bookshop, the best sellers are usually the autobiographies. Why? Because people are interested in other people's stories. The newspapers are full of other people's stories. Why? Because they know that people like to read about other people's stories. If I put a post on Facebook that's got a story in it, have a guess what? That's when I get the most likes. Why? Because people are interested in other people's stories. This is nothing new. Many years ago, Jesus himself knew that people like to hear about other people's stories. That's why when he was preaching and teaching, he often told stories about people. So if people want to hear about other people's stories, how can we go about telling ours? How can we turn our mess into a message? So for the rest of this time that we've got together this morning, you're going to learn very briefly the why and the how of personal stories. Why do we tell our story, and how do we go about telling it? So the why of personal stories, 4 things on the why. Number 1, personal stories demonstrate relevance. Personal stories demonstrate relevance. Stories of human interest are an essential way in our communication today. Traditionally, we have called a person's faith story their testimony. Some people think that sharing your testimony is something that you do only when you're a young Christian. Listen, telling your story is not something you grow out of, it's something you grow into. When I first joined the Bridge, it was called Bolton Pentecostal Church. And I'm a big believer in being accountable to church. So I'm a licensed, you would use that term in your world, an AOG evangelist. I'm one of their few national evangelists, so I've got a card in my pocket that says I'm licensed. So I'm first and foremost linked to the AOG, so I belong to an AOG church. So I joined Bolton Pentecostal Church, as it was called then. And in recent years, Paul, as you've been coming to speak and been part of our world, it's become the Bridge. So I'm a big believer in accountability. I've not got the right to do what I do without the rubber stamp from my church. That's the bottom line. But through that rubber stamp, being accountable, then I can travel all over the UK. And I can be effective, because there's a spiritual thing that goes on when you're locked into your church and you're locked into that accountability thing, which you guys are at Victory. But when I first went to the Bridge, I started my training as an AOG minister, which is like a 2-year thing minimum. I did it in 2 years, the minimum, because I'd already been to Bible college, so I got something wavered. And the minister there was Ian Watson at the time, and there was a lot of people in that church, like there is in this church. And I heard that there was one guy who had a really interesting story. In those days, I was doing lots of weekend missions. So I'd do Friday, Saturday, Sunday, or Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, long weekend missions. And I would have a team that would come with me, and they'd sing and rap or do whatever. So depending where we were, we'd kind of get the right fit for that particular church or the area we wanted to reach out to. So I was looking for people to tell the story. So I heard this guy had a decent story. I said, mate, do you want to come and tell your story? Next month, I'm doing a weekend mission in Bradford. I get invited to all these glamorous places. Hawaii, Derbyshire, Bradford. Many are called, but few are chosen, but fair enough. I says, will you come and tell your story? He says, oh, I don't know about that. I'll think about it. Fair enough. So I got his phone number, I rang him in the week. I says, have you thought about it? Do you want to come and tell your story? He said, no. I've been thinking about it. Telling my story is something I've grown out of. I don't do that anymore. Listen, telling your story is not something you grow out of. It's something that you grow into. Isn't it amazing that he thought he'd grown out of telling his story when personal stories are massive in the world? Personal stories help us. So remember, personal stories demonstrate relevance. I was speaking in a Young Offenders Institute. Again, all the glamorous places. I'll probably sooner be there than Hawaii. Well, it'd be nice to be in YO in Hawaii, but... And this young kid came up to me after I finished speaking. He said, mate, I've read your book. I can see myself in the pages. I can so relate to your story. The age difference, but even so, it could relate to my story. See, personal stories demonstrate relevance. Number 2, personal stories make truth more accessible. Few people are interested in abstract truth, but a story can make the truth more accessible. Our own personal stories can play a key role in our missional strategy of reaching the unchurched with God's story, the good news of Jesus Christ. In fact, I did a dissertation on storytelling when I was at Bible College in 1998 on effective communication today. 80% of that was research into storytelling. Because it's important. We want to connect people to God's truth. Paul discovered this, by the way. We all know that Paul, well, most of us will know that Paul is responsible for writing most or the largest part of the New Testament. That was Paul's writing and teaching for those inside the church. That was Paul's non-public kerygma. Kerygma means proclamation. So when he was teaching those inside the church, his approach was he would get deep and he would unpack the scriptures from the Old Testament and through his own experiences and things like that. So that was Paul teaching to the church. That's not the only way that Paul communicated. You read the book of Acts, Paul's story is in there 3 times. And on those 3 occasions, when we hear Paul telling his story, he's speaking to those outside the church. This was his public kerygma, public proclamation. So when you're communicating to those outside the church, what did Paul do? He told his story. So he got deep down and personal in the church. Outside the church, he used his story. I'm sure he used it more than 3 times, but we have 3 accounts of it in the book of Acts. Personal stories make truth more accessible. Number 3, personal stories have power. Revelation 12:11 says that they overcame the devil by the blood of the Lamb and the word of their testimony. In a court of law, I know there's many of us in here that are familiar with this. In a court of law, you are called to take the witness stand to give a testimony, an account of what you have seen and heard. This is what Christians are called to do, to give our own personal account and to testify to what God has done in our lives. A testimony in a court of law has the power of a legal kind. Our testimony has the power of a spiritual kind, to overcome, as the verse says, the devil. So personal stories have power. And number 4, personal stories are for everybody. You know, as a traveling speaker, I meet lots of people. And I don't think I've heard 2 stories that are the same. You see, all our stories are unique to us. Your story is not my story. My story is not your story. Your story is unique to you. And you've got a story, and it's worth telling. Remember this, that people can argue with your theology about God, but they can't argue about your experiences with God. They can argue with your theology, but when you talk about your experiences, when you tell your stories, they can't argue with that. Nobody can take my experiences away from me. So when I stand in front of prisoners and I do Q&As after I've spoken, and they ask me these questions, I can stand there with confidence, knowing that God's on my case. And I can stand there knowing in my knower, you know when you really know that God is real, God's alive because of the experiences that I've had. You can't take that away from you. You've got a story that's worth telling. Some people think that if you've not got a story where you've been involved with crime and prison and drug taking, then you've not got a story worth telling. Rubbish. You've got a story and it needs to be told. I was speaking in Prestwich. Again, I get invited to all these glamorous places. Methodist Church. And this guy's a friend of mine. I've known him for years. And I was there for Saturday night, Sunday morning. He said, on Sunday morning, Barry, I've got this young lady that wants to go up to tell her story. Are you okay? I said, go fine, do what you want. Just give me my slot. So this young lady gets up. And she starts to tell a story. It went something like this. I've been coming to this church all my life. My mum used to drag me and I hated coming. And then I met some friends in the youth group, and as I got older, I got friendly with some of the youth, and I started to come to youth night. But I used to just come to meet my friends. But I've just got back from Soul Survivor, and something's happened. It's like the light has come on, and when I read the Bible, it's like it's alive, and when I pray, it's like God is actually listening to my prayers. Something's changed. So now I want to get confirmed. It's like a thing that they do in the Methodist Church. And then I'm going to go to college. I'm going to join the young people at college, and I'm going to be out about my faith. She's got a story that's worth telling. When she was at school, how did she go on when all her mates were sleeping around? Did she sleep around? How did she deal with that? You know, we've all got a story, and it's worth telling. Don't think because your story isn't one of crime, drugs, and all that. Because, by the way, it wasn't glamorous. There was a lot of highs, but there's a lot more lows. Believe you me. Personal stories are for everyone. Right, very quickly now. That's the why of personal stories. Now we're going to look at the how of personal stories. How do we go on about telling them? Here's 11 quick tips. 11 quick tips. These things are crucial if you're going to turn your mess into a message. These tips will help you telling your story from a platform, in front of like a church or a school, but also with your mates at college or at work, them kind of scenarios. But the first 6, although there's some crossover, are to do with telling your story from a platform. Number 1, be prepared. Be prepared. Don't think because it's your story you can just get up and speak it out, because it'll never be the same and you'll miss important bits out. Remember this? Preparation, preparation, preparation. The more you prepare, the better you will become and the more confident you will be. Number 2, have a structure. Like every public address, a personal story needs a structure. To put it this way, a beginning, a middle, and an end. Here's a simple structure that I've been using from day one, the first one that I was taught, that I still use sometimes. BC, BC, before conversion, before I became a Christian, what was my life like then? DC, during conversion, how did I become a Christian? AC, after conversion, what have I been doing since? BC, DC, AC, another structure that's a simple one. The then, the now, and the how structure. This is what my life was like then. This is what my life is like now. And then you take the people on the journey from how you got from then to now. Have a structure. By the way, this stuff I've done in different contexts, usually Bible colleges and in training. I'm going to be doing it at the CAP conference this year. I heard last week they've invited me to do this kind of stuff with all their CAP speakers throughout the country. So you're just getting the headlines here. This has been tailored for you guys this morning. Number 3, start with a captivating story. You've all seen, I'm sure you've all seen, a James Bond film at some point in your life. It usually starts with a massive opening scene. where there's a car chase and cars are running off the road and there's helicopters coming in and there's bombs going off. And he's being chased and ducking and diving. And then you see him in the next segment of the film, sat at the side of a river fishing. All nice and cool. That captivating story has got your attention. If you'd been in the madness that was going on in our flat that night, you'd have heard us say it for yourself. Captivating story. I was living on William Kent Crescent, which was one of 5 blocks of flats that were in Hulme, Moss Side, Manchester. They had the nickname the Borings because they were shaped like borings. And I just sold some drugs to this guy, and as I was walking out through the front door, 2 coppers came walking past. They stopped at the door, they walked into my flat and they searched it. They charged me with possession of a Class A drug with intent to supply. And because I ordered the charges, no way did I get bail. I ended up in Strangeways on remand in a cell with a guy called Spike. He was a drug user, I was a drug user. Saturday afternoon, we were lay on our beds, waiting for our visits. The door opened, screws came in, sniffer dogs. Got nicked, put in solitary confinement. I was rattling big time. There was one prison officer that used to come to the spy hole at night, down in the block, and shout stuff through it to wind me up because he knew I was an addict. But let me take you back to the beginning of my life, because my starting life was pretty good. Started with a captivating story. Now I'm going back to the BC, before I was a Christian. So I've got your attention with that story. You want to know how I got there. You want to, the visitors, by the way, those outside the church. How did he end up on there if he's been in prison? So then I'm going to take people on the journey. I'm going to do the BC, DC, AC. Is this useful? Start with a captivating story. Number 4, make it present, not just past. Make it present, not just past. Have you ever heard somebody get up and say, well, I was this, and I was in gangs, and I was a dealer, and I was a criminal, and everybody was scared of me, and then I became a Christian. Thank you very much for listening. That's not their fault. They've just not been taught to make it present, not just past. You need to give a balanced view of your story. So this is what my life was like before. This is how I met God. Some of you have heard me many times. One of my signature stories is always John, the guy that I met on the bus. That can take me a minute, or it can take me 20 minutes. But that's in there on purpose because it's important. That was my conversion bit. And then, ultimately, what I've done since. So if you've been asked to do your story, which I know in Victory you get asked to do that a lot, which is great. Maybe get 4 pieces of A4 paper, I've done this in training, and write BC on one, DC on the other, AC on the other, and then write your story on both sides. That will help you see it, help you see the structure. You don't need to use the notes when you get up because you can internalize it through preparation. But you use the balance amount, BC, DC, AC. So make it present, not just past. Number 5, be creative. I go, as Amber will tell you, I go to a lot of the places, probably 70% of where I go are repeat bookings, which is a compliment in a sense. In business terms, if you get repeat business, then that's a good deal. You know, that's what you need. And we do make room for new events, that they become repeat bookings as well. So I go to places year after year after year, and they book me on the basis of my story, which I'm okay with that. I've got over that now. But they know they're going to get something different. So be creative. So some of you have heard my scars, marks, and tattoos. Get out of the prison gates, broken pieces. You've heard one of my lessons out of my In the Madness talk. The one I've just finished now is scars, marks, prison bars, and dodgy tattoos. The sequel I'm going to be using at Fix. I'm working on another one at the moment called Broken Pieces. I'm always working on something new. But I'm always presenting something new. Number 6, work on the presentation, not just the content. How you deliver it makes a difference. So there's the 6 things to do with telling your story from a platform. Here are 5 very quick things, on how to tell your story face-to-face, one-to-one. Number 1, use non-religious language. Because religious language can create a barrier. I remember going for a walk with my mum and dad when they were alive at Clifton. Clifton Marina, it was called in those days. I think you've been there, Paul, with your dog. I don't know, I've seen your pictures of... Well, that was where we used to go in Salford for like our weekends out. And we walked around Clifton Marina, and I just got a new gadget. I like technology, and my dad was kind of getting into technology. And I sat on one end of the bench, and my dad was sat on the other. My mum was sat in the middle, and I just bought a new gadget, and I was telling my dad what it was, and da-da-da. And my mum said, I'm going to have to get myself one of them. I says, why is that? She said, I can't understand what you two are saying. I can't understand what you two are talking about. You see, sometimes we speak in a language that people don't understand. Use non-religious language. Number 2, be natural in your approach. Man, when I became a Christian, I was the most aggressive witness ever. So aggressive. I'd look for the biggest guy in the street or the biggest group of guys, and I'd run right up to them and I'd tell them, you need Jesus, mate. And I'd try and headbutt them. You need Jesus. Well, I've learned that doesn't work. So now I'm more chilled, more natural. So when I'm having my hair cut, little opportunities, just a natural situation, just taking that opportunity. Number 3, be intentional. J. John challenged us on this a while ago. Be intentional. That's something that you need to be. You need to go out. You need to be intentional when you're at the barber's. Little opportunities. Number 4, use segments of your story. You don't need to tell everybody the whole counsel of your story in 10 minutes. Just tell them little bits of your story. Especially if you're going to see that person again. Because then you can pick up where you've left off. Sometimes I'll do that. I'll leave a bit of a cliffhanger. And then you see him, and what you said that? And then you carry on. Number 5, rely on his power. We need to remember the promise that Jesus said in Acts chapter 1, verse 8, but you'll receive power when the Holy Spirit comes on you. Power to be what? Power to be witnesses. So, go tell your story. Go turn your mess into a message.